people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Our continued coverage of this past weekend's action involving Artingstall in the women's featherweight division warns I'm not a step behind Raven Chapman or Sky Nicolson at all. In my previous video, we talked about the potentiality of those fights.
Yeah.
How likely is it that they happen within the next 12 months? Here, I want to be a little bit more specific. I want to be a little bit more specific about what would happen if she got one of them in the ring. Karis stated, the one with Sky in the Olympics, close fight over 3 rounds. She's a tricky fighter. She's clever in her style of boxing, but I believe that's the only way she can box. I don't believe she can have a tear-up in the center of the ring. I'm not saying you have to, but I'm just saying I don't think she can. You're going to get dragged into some sort of dogfight at some point in your career over 10 rounds. Someone's gonna drag you into it whether you want to be there or not. It's how you deal with it and how you respond to it. Interesting comments that I happen to agree with. Whatever happened between them in the amateurs over 3 rounds, whatever happened, that was the amateurs. This is the pros. Now, some people feel that that fight with Sky and Karis was close in the amateurs. Close enough that Sky could have won it, should have won it. But in the pros, I don't think it would be close. In the pros, I don't think Sky Nicolson, here and now, because she could get better. She's young. She's got time. She can improve. Though here and now, if the question is, who would win the fight if the fight were next? Sky Nicolson or Karis Artingstall? Based on what I've been seeing, not only do I think Karis would beat her, I think Karis would stop her. She just stopped Vanessa Bradford, who's never been stopped. Vanessa Bradford, who's been in there with Tiara Brown, Michaela Mayer, Alicia Baumgartner, Hyun-Mi Choi. If the fight were next between Karis Artingstall and Sky Nicolson, I think Karis would stop her, and here's why. Sky Nicolson has the look of a pure boxer. Outside jabber, mover, economic, and defensively minded. She doesn't have Karis Artingstall's work rate. She doesn't have Karis Artingstall's power. They have similar physical dimensions in terms of the tail of the tape. They're similar in that department, but not when it comes to execution. That's saying that if Karis Artingstall wanted to, she could be an outside fighter like Sky is an outside fighter, an outside jabber, a mover, an economic one. That if she wanted to, she has the same kind of physical dimensions that Sky has to be that defensively minded fighter. But the violence of Karis Artingstall, the violence, has everything to do with her temperance, her propensity to punish her opponents. That's what would win her the fight with Sky Nicolson. I don't think Sky can keep her out for 10 rounds. This is not the amateurs.
Karis!
To disassemble a pure boxer like a Sky Nicolson, you need spite, you need aggression, you need volume, you need pressure. And Karis Artingstall applies it regularly. I've been watching her fights since she debuted as a professional, and her base style, it seems to live somewhere in between a boxer-puncher and a pressure fighter. She's got the fundamental boxing and the setups of the boxer-puncher with the pressure fighter's spite. Penchant for violence. Sky Nicholson's best punches are her straight punches, and the same can be said for Karis Artingstall with one fundamental difference. When Sky shoots a straight jab, she's trying to stay behind it, whereas Karis is attempting to step into it, shooting that straight jab to bring punches over. They're both southpaws, both Sky Nicolson and Karis Artingstall. We know how tricky those southpaws can be, but against each other, neither would have that advantage, so it's gonna boil down to style. Sky trying to manage the distance behind her jab and stay behind it as Karis Artingstall is attempting to close it, and she would have Sky Nicolson under a lot of pressure. Sky's not a big puncher. Karis seems to be. And Sky, while she's very accurate and effective on the outside on the move, she's not a prolific puncher. Karis seems to be. Karis, she's a workhorse. She can throw punches in bunches. The idea that you're just gonna out-hustle her by pot-shotting, only 1 and 2 punches at a time, staying on the outside, that's not gonna work over 10 rounds. You think over 10 rounds she's not gonna catch up to you? Her work rate alone would tire out Skye Nicolson. Now, I don't want to count out Skye completely, because she is young, and there is still time for her to improve and add more bells and whistles to her repertoire. But if the fight were next, I'd go with Karis. And I feel like Karis Artingstall, at least right now, is more ready for Skye than Skye is for Karis. Skye's been fighting a lot of slow-footed, flat-footed plotters, slow hands, slow feet, short fighters, short stumpy fighters.
None of which possess the characteristics of a Karis Artingstall. None of which who can, pose the same challenges that she would. So if it were next, I'd have Karis, but they're not fighting next.
Told you in my last video, they're on different sides of the street, and I don't see this fight happening within the next 12 months, which gives Skye Nicolson more time to work on things and become a more seasoned professional.
So as stated, if it were next, I'd favor Karis, but it's not going to be a next fight. Could be a while before we see this one.
Would you fight Bivol or Benavidez?
Yeah, I actually do want to, after I'm going to get done with 168, I'm going up to 175. And that's the first fight I want. I want Bivol at 175. So, I'm very excited. Have you seen our sparring sessions?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So we had some great sparring.
That was with Headgear and Big Gloves.
We had some great sparring sessions.
He's a good boxer.
He's a great dude. He's a great boxer. But like I said, I'm very competitive, and I really want to be the best. When I was young and fat, everybody said I wasn't going to be nothing. You know what I mean? So that's just where that fighting spirit comes from.
Now, in the spirit of fairness, David Benavidez is only answering a question that he was asked, but we've been hearing these kinds of answers for approximately 8 months, close to a year from David Benavidez saying he's going to do this to Bivol, he's going to do that. One interview, he said he'd knock him out. And those are fighting words. That's what they are. So for 8 months, David Benavidez has been carrying on about what he would do to that light heavyweight champion. All the while, that light heavyweight champion has been free to fight. If you really were serious about taking him on, you would have taken him on, but you're not serious, you're just talking.
I was actually surprised how many individuals rushed to David Benavidez's defense when I expressed these criticisms by way of my own social media, saying he's not done at 168. Well, when is he going to be done?
Do you realize how long he's been there, how long he's already been there? He first won the WBC title over 5 years ago. What was it, 6? In 2017, he's held that title there 2 times. He's been there for a very, very long time. And in between the time it's taken him to grab that WBC title in 2017, and now a lot has happened for a lot of fighters at a lot of weights, and he's still sitting there talking about what he might do, what he will do when he moves up. And when is that? Neverary 15th?
How many unified champions have been crowned since 2017? At how many weight classes? How many undisputed champions? Terrence Crawford?
2 times. In the time it's taking David Benavidez to do anything, Terrence Crawford saw himself crowned an undisputed champion 2 times. Usyk became an undisputed champion. Josh Taylor became an undisputed champion. Now Inoue, Clarissa Shields, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Chantel Cameron,
Devin Haney, Jermel Charlo, Canelo.
And they wonder what my real issue with David Benavidez is. This era of coddled fighters, coddled American-based fighters. Consider that in many ways, Dimitri Bivol beat the man to be the man. Up until that point, Canelo Alvarez was regarded as the man to beat, and Dimitri Bivol beat him. And instead of pursuing a fight with Dimitri, actually pursuing a fight as opposed to just saying it,
they're still pursuing Canelo instead of the man that beat him, the man that's been free all year.
Demetrius Andrade went as far as calling Dimitri a basic fighter. Canelo got beat by a basic fighter, so why didn't you go up there and show us how basic he is? David Benavidez, for the last 8 months, he's been saying that he'd beat him and he'd knock him out. He's still saying it. Those are fighting words. And all the while, Dimitri Bivol has been available to fight. So if you really meant what you said and you were willing to stand on it, you'd be fighting him, not each other.
You've had over 8 months to do it. Consider that instead of fighting the man that beat Canelo Alvarez, David elected to fight the man that Canelo Alvarez beat, one of them in Caleb Plant. a fight with Dimitri would have moved the needle more than that fight, because hindsight is 2020.
You held off on doing that fight for something like 3 or 4 years. You held off on doing it just so that it wouldn't sell nothing at the box office. It didn't sell nothing. It didn't move the needle. A fight with Dimitri would have. I'll go as far as saying that fighting Dimitri once, just once, would mean more and make a bigger statement than what David has done than fighting Caleb, who Canelo Alvarez beat, and Demetrius Andrade, who's never been a big draw and doesn't have a signature fight anyway. One fight with Dimitri is worth more than 2 fights with those 2 guys. It says more.
And it sells more.
Do you think Showtime exiting the sport of boxing after 37 years in it, after all this time, do you think that's an accident? Look at the viewing figures for David Benavidez' previous fights. From what, 2-3 years ago, at a time when most Americans were trapped at home. During the shutdown, look at what the viewing figures were, and look at the matchmaking. It's not an accident. You guys kept putting fighters in fights nobody cares about for so long, the people at Showtime, that is, the people above them, they decided to give you the boot. Your content, your brand of boxing wasn't delivering. It wasn't moving the needle. And even now, there are options that really would move the needle more than what they are doing. Fighting Caleb Plant, it seemed a foregone conclusion to many that David would beat him. He didn't knock him out, but he did beat him, and now who he's fighting? Demetrius Andrade. Demetrius Andrade has never been a big draw, but if it were David Benavidez versus Dimitri Bivol at light heavyweight for a full title, not an interim belt, a full belt, a full title,
I guarantee you that would have got David more attention than the Caleb Plant fight did, and more attention than the Demetrius Andrade fight is going to.
I guarantee you if it were Benavidez versus Bivol at the box office, it would bring in more numbers than the Caleb Plant fight did. That didn't sell anything. And this fight probably isn't going to either, because that fight, unlike these fights, that's a risky fight. You want to beat the man.
If you want to beat a man, you've got to beat the man. Now, Dimitri Bivol, he already did that. He already beat Canelo. So why don't you go up there and show Canelo how it's done? You say you can beat him?
Say you can knock him out, you sparred him. You know, PBC fighters, they love to talk about their sparring sessions. Why don't you do it under the hot lights when it counts? Why don't you do that? It's because you're not serious. You're just talking. You don't want a light heavyweight champion in his prime. What you want is a naturally smaller fighter in his mid-30s who ain't got much power anyway. That's what you want, because that's who you're fighting. And the fights don't make themselves. You didn't land on him by accident, so let's just cut the fucking crap. Finally, in men's heavyweight news, Eddie Hearn floats Agit Kabayel, Philippe Hrgovic, Otto Wallin, and Manuel Charr as possible opponents for Anthony Joshua's December fight. You know, they were playing with the idea of Anthony Joshua fighting on the undercard of Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank. Hearn was asked about Mahmoud Charr, the WBA's regular heavyweight champion, but he seemed less enthusiastic about that possibility. Not overly, Hearn told Seconds Out when asked about Charr as an opponent for Joshua. He's looking for an opponent. He's got the WBA regular title, which we certainly wouldn't be saying Joshua is a 3-time heavyweight champion if he won that belt. Definitely not. But at the same time, if he's going to fight someone in December, I'm not saying it'll be Charr, but it could be Kabayel. It could be Hrgovic or Wallin. Out of this situation, let's see what happens. For the undercard, if he were to fight on the undercard of Eubank versus Benn, Manuel Charr might be ideal because he is a relatively inexpensive opponent. Let's be honest, he's just looking for somebody to sell that WBA title to, that regular title, not to be confused with the full one that Usyk has.
Hearn ruled out Deontay Wilder, Andy Ruiz, or Zhilei Zhang as possibilities for Joshua in reference to a December fight. Emphasis on December.
If the idea were to have Anthony Joshua box in a keep busy fight on an undercard, you would use a guy like a Manuel Charr, I think, for something like that. But if it's a Philippe Hrgovic, if it's an Agit Kabayel or an Otto Wallin, well, those are headliners. You could actually have Anthony headline those fights. It's not going to be Deontay Wilder for obvious reasons. It's not going to be Andy Ruiz, and it probably won't be Zhilei Zhang, Hearn said. So you have to look at the top 15. Honestly, we're more sure on the date than the opponent. He wants to fight in December. In his head, he says he wanted to fight 3 times in a year, but I said, you fought in April. He said, no, I want to fight 3 times this year. So he would love to get in December, and we'll have to keep one eye on the 23rd of December because we just don't know what's going to happen. December 23rd, is when Eddie Hearn wants to do the Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn fight. Coincidentally, that's the same day that Fury is supposed to be fighting Usyk, and I still struggle with that. I still struggle with the idea that those two are going to fight before this year is out. It seems almost too good to be true, but we'll see what happens. You ask yourself, why can't it be Deontay Wilder? That's still a very big fight in and of itself. That's still a very big fight, and you could sell it with or without the Saudis financing, so why don't they do it? And it's the deal structure. The way the Saudis were doing the deals, they were making one fighter one deal and another fighter another deal.
They would do the deals separately, which is somewhat different than what you see in the UK or the United States. They would deal with each fighter individually, do the deals separately, and the dollar amount for each deal was greater than anything you could find on this side of the world.
It was for the best money you could find. Now, if you were to have both teams come back to the table, splits become an issue. Who gets what? Who gets the lion's share? I have no doubts that Deontay is going to want to get whatever Anthony Joshua gets, even though his last pay-per-view tanked, even though his last pay-per-view bombed. So you can see where that might be an issue. Trying to do the fight without the Saudis' involvement. Splits become an issue. You think about Zhilei Zhang, and Zhilei Zhang has 2 more fights under his Queensberry Promotions contract. So if you tried to do a fight with him now, Queensberry might want to be involved, and that makes that a mess. That could be an issue.
We know that Terry Lane said they would love to do that fight. They'd love to do this, and they'd sign on the dotted line. Everything you expect to hear, but the reality of it is, Zhilei Zhang is under contract with Queensberry. Anthony fights exclusively under Matchroom.
So unless Zhilei Zhang can cross back over to Matchroom, he has that kind of autonomy, without Frank Warren and Queensberry getting involved, I don't see that fight as a realistic fight, even though I would like to see it. The names that Eddie Hearn did pitch, Otto Wallin, Philippe Hrgovic, those 2 guys are under orders from the IBF to fight each other. Philippe has to fight him or he loses his IBF interim status.
That order came down something like, 2 weeks? A little over 2 weeks ago? He's got to fight that guy.
Leaving the lesser-known, Germany-based Agit Kabayel, who still is an unbeaten fighter here today in today's heavyweight division. Not a guy big on power, you know. He's more of a boxer than a puncher, and he's coordinated. He's actually pretty good. He can move. He beat Derek Chisora a few years ago in Monte Carlo.
He kind of reminds me of Australia's own unbeaten up-and-comer, Justice Hooney. Guy with good feet, good hands, good speed, and he's a boxer. He's a boxer, not a puncher.
I wouldn't mind that fight. Many would view it, though, as the safer option compared to what else is out there, unless we forget the story is AJ's going to be breaking in a new trainer the next time we see him because he has parted ways with Derek James.
You don't go taking on a dangerous fight when you're experimenting with a new trainer and a new base style, which seems to be happening for Anthony every other fight almost.
Not overly critical. I don't mind an Agit Kabayel fight, but I'm not over the moon either. So we'll see which option they decide to go with.